When I look at you, I see myself. Do you immediately understand what I mean? Probably not. Neither did I the first time. But when I did get the essence, it hit me like a hammer. It's funny. Sometimes it's easier to understand and see yourself through somebody else. Although that other person is a complete stranger, is from a different world, a different culture. How? Make real contact with that other person. Forget about yourself. In the act of losing yourself, you find yourself. I'm Christine Otten, and in the next 15 minutes, you're going to hear my story, how I got that insight as a novelist and as a person. It's 2008. Obama is running for president, and I'm in Idlewild, Michigan, in the United States, a small town in the woods. I'm in the home of Mabel Williams, the widow of the black freedom fighter Robert F. Williams. Williams became enemy of the state, public enemy number one, because he helped the black community in his hometown, Monroe, North Carolina, to fight against racist violence, with guns if necessary. She just told me how they overnight had to flee their house with their 2 little sons for the Ku Klux Klan and the FBI. How they find asylum in Cuba and built a new life there. She said she changed through her marriage, yelling and screaming from a shy conservative girl into a proud black woman with self-respect. Then she gives me a little book. Negroes with Guns, it says, and it's written by her husband, Robert Williams. Did you know the Black Panthers were inspired by this book? She says. No. She opens the first page and writes these words. To Christine, may your writings always reflect the love you exude in your conversations. Love and best wishes, Mabel Williams. In hindsight, I read these words as a kind of assignment to me. Mabel Williams is one of the main characters in my new novel, We Had Love, We Had Guns, based on her and her husband's and son's remarkable life story. Why do I tell you this? I have been thinking about this meeting a lot lately because there's a huge international discussion going on about cultural appropriation. In other words, can a white author write from a black perspective? Can a white author create a black character? In our country, Karin Amat-Mukrim, the author, interfered. She said, when you tell somebody else's story, ultimately you write from your own perspective. That's normal. The problem is that the white perspective on history is so dominant. And she says, who are you as a white author to think you are free from any social context? That is a white privilege mentality in literature. Wow. This was about me and my work. I had just written We Had Love, We Had Guns from the perspective of Mabel and John Williams, African Americans. Based on their personal stories, I wrote a novel about resistance, love, and family, and racism, the fight against it, the personal consequences of that fight. I went under their skin. I thought I could do that, otherwise I wouldn't have started it. Writing from a black perspective comes natural to me, I feel, just like writing from the perspective of a man. I did that in my previous books, but it didn't happen overnight. I didn't just wake up one morning thinking, ooh, let's write books about black people. No, it didn't go like that. It all started in Harlem, New York, in the year of 2000 when I first met the African-American poet Omar Bin Hasaan. The meeting that changed my life. I didn't know anything of Omar Bin Hasaan, never heard of him. It was my then 11-year-old son, a huge hip-hop fan, who showed me a documentary about the backgrounds of rap music. And in that documentary, Omar Bin Hasaan was introduced. He was talking about the last poets, a group of militant poets who became instantaneously famous in the late 60s, early 70s with radical, shocking, personal poems like "Niggas are scared of revolution." I was hungry for a new subject to write about. I wanted to go to America. That's how it began. Let me tell you a little story. I went to Harlem to meet Umar. I was very excited, never been to Harlem, didn't know anything about the black community there. I think Umar was a little less excited. "Who are you? What do you want?" was the first thing he said when I called him. He had forgotten about our appointment. But we met the next day in the apartment of a fellow poet overlooking Harlem. And it felt like coming home. Talking under his breath with a warm, melodious voice, Umar dragged me into his world. The last poets are the microcosm of Black America, he said, referring to their internal fights, drug abuse, personal defeats, as well as to their vigorous hope and power. Soon he started talking about his father, Sonny, who had been a brilliant trumpet player, but also was abusive because of drinking, could never hold a job. That's why Umar had to work as a kid in the red light district as a shoeshine boy. Umar said that at the age of 11 he had tried to kill his father. He bought a little hatchet. His mom saw the hatchet in time and took it from him. When his father saw his mother with the hatchet, he beat her up again, just as he was used to. But when he left the house, he looked at Umar, a look in his eyes that said, "I knew it was you. I knew it was you." This story hit me hard. The hurt I felt behind the words, the guilt. I recognized that from my own childhood. Just as Umar's dad, my father had become mentally ill. Not because of racism and exclusion, but of poverty and neglect. And unnoticed, our fathers had passed their feelings of shame and inferiority on to us. We recognized that in each other that night. I had never tried to kill my dad, but I refused him entrance to our home at 15 when he ran away from a psychiatric ward. "You were always so harsh," he once randomly said. In my ears, that sounded just the same as, "I knew it was you." Demons, Umar called his destructive feelings, that little voice inside the back of your head that tells you, "You ain't shit and you're gonna fail anyway." "Niggers love anything but themselves," he would later write. This was what made me want to write the novel, The Last Poets. I wanted to understand why a brilliant poet, a loving man like Omar Bin Hasaan, had been so destructive and left his wife and children for drugs. I wanted to understand what racism, poverty, and exclusion does to the soul of a person. How self-hate is being transferred from parents to children. And what gave Umar the strength to come back? That was the underlying drive that had nothing to do with skin color, but everything with identification and curiosity. And it struck Umar as well. When I look at you, I see myself, he would later say. So it worked both ways, right? Are you still with me? If there's one thing I'd like you to remember today, is this. Sometimes it's easier to understand yourself through somebody else, another person. Lose yourself. Sometimes it's easier to understand yourself through somebody else. Someone, an apparent stranger from a different culture, a different world. Lose yourself. And fiction is such a great tool for that. The novel is one of the rare places where two complete strangers become deeply intimate, because you can experience the feelings and thoughts of somebody else. Let me tell you this. After that first meeting in Harlem, I immersed myself in African American history and culture. But I learned most from talking to the last poets and their families, women mostly. When I eventually started writing, I felt like a fish that could swim from one life to the next. My I, my me, my inner being, almost being fluid. And that was such a personal liberation. It was easy to identify with the last poets. Even the most violent scenes I could write with ease. It revealed my darkest emotion. Nasreen Malik, a Sudan-British writer, says, an author should not ask permission to create a character from a different race. It's the humility towards their characters what's important. And I agree, an author should always be humble towards his characters. Only when you are prepared to completely surrender yourself to your characters as a writer, lose yourself, connect yourself with them, then they will tell you something you didn't already know. Then something changes. Real human contact means change. Because what arises from that contact is not you or the other, but something new. That unnameable something that connects us. When I look at you, I see myself. Thank you.